Hi, I'm Steffany Strange. Want to hear something scary?
It was a cool autumn evening in 1956. John, a middle-aged father, was sitting in the living room on his favorite brand new leather chair, reading the newspaper. As he finished a section, he handed it to his 7-year-old daughter sitting on the ground near him, who was cutting out paper dolls. The peace and quiet was interrupted by the doorbell. Who could that be at such a late hour? John wondered. He opened the door to find a handsome young man in a suit, carrying a briefcase and smiling widely. "Good evening. I hate to bother you at such an odd hour," the man said, his voice warm and inviting. "But my car doesn't seem to be in working order, and I was wondering if I could borrow your phone to call for assistance." John scanned the stranger up and down. "And what brings you to our neighborhood?" "Oh, pardon my manners." The stranger handed him a business card that said "Family First" in big letters. "The name's Robert. I sell life insurance." As John inspected the business card, his wife Lauren appeared behind him. "Why don't you come in and out of the cold? You are more than welcome to use our phone, but you have to stay for dinner first, and I won't take no for an answer." She motioned for Robert to come inside while John stared daggers at her. Lauren offered the new leather chair for Robert to sit in while she finished up dinner. Robert commented on how nice the new leather felt. He then proceeded to explain the types of policies he sold and how they're ideal for families. "This world is full of the unexpected," Robert said. "Don't you want your family to be protected in case something happened to you?" John still wasn't comfortable with this man in their house, and before he could even respond to Robert's question, he noticed a shift in Robert's expression. Robert was looking at the newspaper headline that the young girl was cutting up. It read, "Missing insurance salesman still not found," and the rest was cut out. John looked back at Robert, whose once confident posture had devolved into trembling nervousness. "You know, I should probably get out of your hair," Robert said as he stood up to leave. "I'm gonna get going." "What about the phone?" John said bitingly. Just then, Lauren burst through the room to announce that dinner was ready. Robert continued to politely decline, but Lauren sat him down at the dinner table with the rest of the family. Realizing he didn't have much choice, Robert began to dive into the roast placed in front of him. And it was delicious, so tender and juicy, unlike anything he'd ever had. He washed it down with a swig of red wine and gave his compliments to the chef. As he put the drink back down, he saw that the girl was staring at him. Her lips were now turned upright into a mischievous smile. She covered her mouth, suppressing her giggles. Robert wondered what it was that she found so funny. Then, his vision began to blur. His hearing began to fade in and out. He could faintly make out John and Lauren's hushed voices.
"I'm sorry I didn't consult you first, John, but you know how much I love salesmen. The young and ambitious ones are always the tastiest." "It's okay, dear. It worked out anyway. I think he was beginning to catch on to us."
In his state of increasing confusion, Robert made a realization. He realized what happened to the missing salesman in the headline, realized why that leather chair felt so new, realized what it was in his drink, and realized who he had just eaten. Robert wanted to be in the business of helping families from the unexpected. Unfortunately, he wasn't prepared for this family who would be helping themselves to him.
Jessica was thrilled when she learned that Lizzie Borden's house had been turned into an inn specializing in haunted tours. The chance to visit the infamous property was a dream come true. The idea of Lizzie hacking her father and stepmother into pieces centuries ago thrilled Jessica. She convinced her two best friends, Rosario and Tanya, into spending the night there. Hoping to do some paranormal investigating for her birthday, Jessica packed an EMF meter and a digital recorder in the hopes of capturing Lizzie's voice. which was rumored to echo through the halls. After a long drive, the girls finally arrived at the house. They each headed to their rooms to unpack and then headed downstairs for champagne. As Jessica walked into her room, she checked her EMF meter for any paranormal activity, but there was no activity. As she moved around the room with it, she heard a startled cry from downstairs. She raced towards the noise, hoping to discover something scary. But it was just Rosario, who had been spooked by a painting of Lizzie. Jessica rolled her eyes and suggested her friends headed back upstairs and relax while she did some exploring. She made her way outside with her equipment. "Come on, Lizzie," she called. "I know you're here." While Jessica explored, Rosario drew a bubble bath. Sliding into the tub, she immediately felt relaxed. As her eyes began to droop, a child's whisper echoed throughout the room. "Get out." She tried to sit up, but a hand appeared out of nowhere. Pushing her head down into the water, she struggled, trying to free herself. Her eyes bulged in terror, her mind unable to process what was happening. She kicked up in the air, splashing water everywhere, hoping someone would hear her, but no one came. The last thing she saw before drowning was the silhouette of a young boy in old-fashioned clothing. Across the hall, Tanya was resting on her bed with her headphones on. She was deep in the music when she felt a sudden chill and a door slam. She looked up but was immediately blinded as someone smothered a pillow over her face. She clawed and scratched, slashing her unknown attacker's face with her nails, but as much as she fought back, she quickly suffocated. Jessica was blissfully unaware of the tragedy upstairs, having picked up some EMF activity and followed it to the basement. The EMF device went crazy, and she turned on the recorder, excitedly hoping to capture something on tape. While kneeling, her weight propped open one of the boards and she gasped in shock. A pile of old bones had been buried under the wood. She jumped backwards and screamed at the terror in front of her. There was a ghost of a young boy in very old-fashioned, raggedy clothing. He spoke, saying his name was Augustine. "What are you doing in my house?" the apparition demanded. Jessica bravely replied, I wanted to see Lizzie Borden." The boy sneered. "This is my house. I made Lizzie kill her stupid parents." While Jessica trembled with fear, Augustine revealed his father had buried him alive under this very floorboard as punishment hundreds of years before he killed his baby sister. A chill ran down Jessica's spine as she realized that her two best friends were upstairs alone. She raced to their rooms, but of course it was too late. They were both dead. Jessica sat huddled in the corner of Tanya's bedroom, her eyes squeezed tightly shut, her hands over her ears, desperately trying to block the sound of Augustine's laughter. The police soon arrived and arrested her. After all, she was the one covered in blood. She tried to explain everything and grab the digital recorder, but when she pushed play, there were no childish voices, no ghostly confession, just static. She begged them to look under the floorboards in the basement, but they found nothing. No bones, not a shred of evidence to corroborate her story. None of the locals had ever heard the tale of Augustine, and only Jessica heard the giggles as she was let out in cuffs. Unlike Lizzie, Jessica was found guilty and sentenced to life behind bars. She spent the long and lonely hours wondering if Augustine was real, or had she been so obsessed with the Borden case that deep down, she just wanted to know what it felt like to kill her best friends.
Jeannie and her daughter, Azura, used to live in Brazil with the rest of their extended family. Azura was a bright little girl who was always happy and energetic and had no trouble making friends. But when she turned 7, something changed. She was no longer interested in playing with her friends and became cold and distant to everyone, including her mother. Azura would curl up in her bedroom alone, and Jeannie would overhear her talking to herself for hours. Jeannie thought Azura might be going through a phase and invented an imaginary friend for herself. But Azura's grandmother thought otherwise. That's because one night, Azura's grandmother walked by the bedroom where Azura was talking to herself. She stopped in the doorway and looked into the room, and screamed. Azura turned and hissed at her grandma like a rabid animal and crouched on all fours, growling deeply. Her grandmother ran out of the room and locked the door from the outside. "Jeannie, you have to call the priest now. There is a demon in this house." Jeannie is not a religious woman. She thought her mother was being a little dramatic, but nevertheless, she called a priest to come over to the house. He arrived the next morning and the grandmother explained what she saw. There was a demon with big bat wings and cloven hooves. Its skin was dark and scaly and its hands had giant talons. Jeannie just snickered at this description. The grandmother unlocked the door and there was Azura crying hysterically. "Don't go! Don't go, please don't go, no, please don't go, don't go, don't go, don't go, please don't go." The moment he saw this, the priest dropped his Bible and rosary and closed the door. "That's no demon. That's a mancha chico." "A what?" "It is a creature that is born from a demon and cursed without love. They seek out mortals to love them and attach themselves to those who show them kindness." Jeannie laughed. This was absolutely ridiculous. When they fall in love with a human, they truly care for them and keep them safe, but for a price. In return for their devotion, the Mancha Chico will gain possession of the human soul in the afterlife. We have to save her. The priest re-entered the bedroom and said a prayer. When he came out of the room, Jeannie saw Azura sleeping peacefully in her bed. A few days later, Jeannie was about to run some errands and Azura stopped her. "Don't leave." "But sweetie, I need to buy us some." "Please." Jeannie was a little freaked out by how sincere her daughter was, so she stayed home. Later that day, when they were watching the news, they learned that there was an active shooter at the nearby mall, the mall that Jeannie was going to go to. "Why did you make me stay home?"
Cheliso told me to tell you. He doesn't want me to be sad, so he will help me keep you safe.
There were multiple instances like this when Azura would tell her mother to avoid a certain area, only to later discover that it could have saved her life. And Jeannie wasn't the only one who was experiencing good luck. Azura's school bullies had stopped picking on her and began apologizing to her and giving her gifts. Azura was hit by a car on the sidewalk and flown into a gutter, but walked away without a scratch. Azura's little sister was diagnosed with a terrible skin disease, only to have it completely healed a few weeks later. To Jeannie, it was all just good luck. But according to Azura, this was all because of Cheliso, her demon. Years had gone by and Azura was now 15 years old. Jeannie found it a little odd that her daughter had never talked about any school crushes or shown any interest in dating, so she decided to talk to her daughter. "You know, when I was your age, I couldn't stop talking about boys. Is there anyone you like at your school? You can tell me." "I have Cheliso. He says I'm his one and only, and it'd be wrong to leave him when he's been so good to me. Hasn't he been good to us, Mama?" Jeannie did not like that response. She thought that her daughter had finally grown out of this ridiculous phase and she couldn't stand these lies anymore. "Enough, Azura, enough with Cheliso. He isn't real. I don't ever want to hear about Cheliso again. You understand?" Jeannie stormed out of the room, leaving Azura in tears. After she had cooled down, Jeannie decided to apologize to her daughter. She entered her bedroom and froze. There was Azura, curled up on her bed, but in the lap of a giant demon. He looked just as Azura's grandmother had described years ago. Jeannie couldn't believe what she saw, but there he was. Cheliso was real. Azura is now 22 years old and only occasionally mentions Cheliso. And Jeannie will remind her that Cheliso plans to take her soul in the afterlife. "And you're okay with that?" "Of course. Hasn't he been good to us, Mama?"
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.